Back now, heads of state and country representatives gathered in the capital for the SADC Extraordinary Organ Troika Summit and SADC Troika and Force Intervention Brigade troop contributing countries. Chaired by President Gengob in his capacity as the chair of the SADC organ on politics, defense, and security, the summit noted with concern the unstable and deteriorating security situation in that is Eastern DRC. Now, as part of SADC's interventions, the summit has resolved to deploy a SADC force within the framework of that is the SADC standby force in effort to restore peace and security in the Central African region. Now, joining me with a reflection of yesterday's meeting and key outcomes, we have invited Deputy Executive Director for Multilateral Relations and Cooperation in the Ministry of International Relations and Cooperation, Ambassador Jerobeam Shaanika. A very good morning, Ambassador. How are you doing?
Morning, Nicole.
You well?
I'm fine.
Great stuff. So I think let's start off with a backtrack to January this year. That was when the last meeting was held. What strides have we made since the last meeting?
Well, since the last meeting, as you know, there were decisions taken from that summit that took place in January. Mm-hmm. And there were also issues that emanated from the 42nd summit, which took place in August last year in Kinshasa, DRC, whereby the organ chair was mandated to discuss with the DRC to kind of reassert the role of the FBI within MONUSCO, and of course also to discuss matters with the United Nations Secretary General at the margins of the General Assembly that was last year in September. So that was done. Mm-hmm. And then in September, the Ministerial Committee of the organ also recommended that a field assessment mission be undertaken in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo to assess the situation and to see what are the steps can be taken depending on the outcome of the field assessment. And it was then one of those issues that the January summit was then requested that the field assessment mission report be presented to a summit to be determined, and that was then the summit that took place yesterday.
Let's talk about some of the challenges. Has there been any challenges with regards to peace, with restoring peace in DRC?
Yes, there has been a challenge, and the challenge is, as you know, there are armed groups that are operating in the Eastern DRC that are really causing a challenge to peace and stability in that region, and resulting to many people being internally displaced. And not only that, and many people have died. And that is a challenge, because what this region needs is peace and stability.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the summit has deployed forces, as we have established, a SADC standby force. Talk to us about this and the possible modalities with regards to this deployment as well, Ambassador.
Well, first, standby force is, as you know, SADC standby force was established by a memorandum of understanding, which was signed by the heads of state of the SADC region at a meeting in Lusaka in 2007. And this is a multi-dimensional forces, regional multi-dimensional force and peace support force that comprises of military component, police component, and also civilian component, to support the region in terms of instability or even when there are disaster strike. So I think it's within that concept, and it's also established within the framework of African standby force. So it is a force that can be deployed when the need arises as a challenge that the region might face.
Okay.
And it's meant to protect people and ensure sustainable peace.
So with regards to these interventions, are there timelines that set here? And if interventions and support sort of proves to be, minimal or futile, what happens next?
No, I think the standby force is a measure while the diplomatic track is put in place. The timelines, one can say, is when the situation normalized. Because if the situation remains critical, it requires a continuation of that intervention. We have seen many conflicts in many parts of the world. They have taken longer to be resolved. I can even give you an example of the conflict which was here in Namibia, the War of Independence. There was a military track, and there was also a diplomatic track. So how long did it take to be resolved? It took longer. But what is required is also a recognition from those who are involved in the conflict to realize that there is no solution to the conflict. There are times when people need to sit down and look at the differences they have, and then they find a path to which they will be able to solve the conflict in that country. Right. But I think some of these conflicts are perpetuated by people who have nothing to lose inside, but they intend to gain. And therefore, they do not want to see the conflict ending, so that whatever benefit they are getting from there continue to exploit the situation. This is unfortunate and, of course, unacceptable. Absolutely. At the same time.
Indeed, Ambassador, not an overnight thing for sure. Now, in your role at the Ministry, Ambassador, how do meetings such as these bring coercion in the region, and how does it speak, to the situation on the ground?
Well, the meetings are effort to say, here is the situation that we are facing. What are the possible measures and alternatives that we can put in places? Because it's joint effort, other than when a country that is affected just stand there and they plead for help. Because we are saying that DRC is part of the SADC region, and the SADC region has a common objective toward deeper integration and sustainable development, peace. Now, how do we ensure that the measure we are taking are geared toward meeting those objectives that the region has set itself?
Indeed. Let's touch a little bit on yesterday as well, Ambassador. What other outcomes were there? What else formed part of the program yesterday that maybe you can share with the Namibian people?
Well, the summit was primarily looking into the situation in DRC. As you can read from the communique, the first paragraph was the expression of concern, because the people in the eastern DRC are facing a serious challenge. And it's based on that challenge that really necessitated that as a region, we need to look into way and means of how to help the people of DRC. But also, as you know, there are also other players in the region. And I think one of the point was to say, since there are other players who are not necessarily part of the SADC, perhaps there is a need to bring together, to all of us to come together, those regions that are in the DRC to come together and then chart a path of how to cooperate, perhaps under the umbrella of the African Union, because most of these regional groupings that are there, they are part of the African Union. Maybe as part of the African Union, that we will then together, jointly, and within the objective of African Union, to help the people of the Democratic Republic of the Congo for peace to return to that country. I think that those are the efforts. But you see, there is always good intention. Sometimes good intention don't get the result they wanted. But as long as there is a political will, the journey might be long, but where there's a political will, it's always meet its objective.
Objectives. Indeed. Ambassador, as we wrap up this conversation, what else would you like to leave the Namibian nation with this morning?
No, I think just to take from what we are discussing, this year and this month, the African Union, which was then Organization of African Unity, is commemorating 60 years anniversary. And I think it is incumbent upon us as Africans to ask ourselves that we are now at this 60 years after the foundation of the Organization of African Unity, or which is now the African Union. Which road are we intending to take? Do we intend to take the road that brought us, is the issue that we are discussing? Or are we going to take the road that we have set ourselves, the road to peace, the road to sustainable development, and the road to integration? I think that it's a question every African, including those who are forming armed group, to ask themselves. Do you want to be an armed group for the rest of your life? Or do you want to pursue the path to peace? We are now 60 years. We have 40 years for us to implement the Agenda 2063. When we reach there, what type of Africa we want? We have set ourselves that a task to silence the gun by 2020. Now we have postponed it to 2030. Do we want to keep postponing this target, or do we want to attain them? So I think this is a question that we need to ask for ourselves.
Absolutely.
So do we want a continent where our children and their succeeding generation live in peace? Or do we want our children to continue forming armed group? I think that's really the question. So therefore, any action that we are going to take as African must also be in tune with the goals that we are setting ourselves. Otherwise, it will look like a cat and the donkey and the cat, and there's a tree in between. The donkeys are on this side, and the cat is going the other side, and there's a tree blocking them.
Pulling in the same direction, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Ambassador. I think you definitely left us with some food for thought here this morning. I think that is a very good way to end this conversation. The questions you asked, what kind of Africa do we want? And we thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you for having me.
There you have it, Ambassador Jerobeam Shaanika here this morning, chatting to us. That is about the just ended SADC Extraordinary Organ Troika Summit. Yeah, that was yesterday in the capital, and also what the current situation is on the ground there in DRC and the support that we are lending. And at the end of the day, ultimately here it is about pursuing the peace and the stability that we do want.